Hey, it's a wild Wednesday edition of the Schilling Show, and welcome here to this place for the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. You found it for 2 hours. Past that, I can't guarantee your experience, but we're glad that you're here with us from noon to 2 weekdays and 24/7 online at schillingshow.com. Lots going on to talk about, and the phone lines are open. 434-977-1070. Marshall stands by to take your calls politely and professionally. 977-1070. Grab a line while you can. There's no time like the present. You can also send me an email to robs@cvilleRightNow.com, robs@cvilleRightNow.com. And don't forget the Schilling Show hotline where you can call 24/7, leave a voicemail or a text. Again, 24/7 doesn't wake me up, to 218-2349. If you forget any of the contact information, go to schillingshow.com where you have the opportunity to be in touch with us in many, many ways, including a snail mail address, and occasionally people send in handwritten notes or little typed notes, and I appreciate hearing from you, sometimes even with a nice gift enclosed. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support over all of these years. Also, Steve Scesa joins us. I got an outreach from this guy, and I just love when this happens. Like, I have regular people that help me book the show. They just send in pitches. That's their business. They represent clients, and they send me pitches, and they assist in facilitating guests onto this program at the times that are convenient, mutually convenient. But this was a direct outreach from the author of the Second Bill of Rights, a blueprint for constitutional restoration. Now, I'm always very skeptical when somebody wants to introduce another Bill of Rights or a second Bill of Rights, because I am very protective of the foundational principles of the country. However, I had a chance to read this list, and they all pretty much make sense to me. And I was surprised at the fact there's a couple of them that John White has advocated for over the years. But I was very, very surprised that I pretty much agreed with all of them to one extent or another. We're going to get into this proposal and a lot to think about with Steve. It's about time. Better late than never, Winsome Sears. Good job. Stephen Scesa joins us, the founder of Future First Publishing, with this really interesting concept. And I had a chance to look through it. I'm like, wow, I really think these are quite right on target. The Second Bill of Rights, a blueprint for constitutional restoration. Steve Scesa, thanks for joining us today on the Schilling Show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it as well.
So let's start out with the why, and then we're going to get to the what, because there's a reason that you've put in a tremendous amount of effort into putting these together and all the supporting information and documentation that you have.
Yeah, it harkens back to when I was in graduate school and law school, and my constitutional law professor, who instilled a questioning type of approach towards constitutional law that over the next 10, 15 years turned into more direct inquiry and asking, a particular parlor game type question of where do we think we are, or I'd ask the people, where do we think we are relative to 1776 and 1861? It garnered very unique answers over those 15 years that have changed even more so in the past 6 months.
Yeah,
so it's been very it's really interesting, and it boils into everything that goes on with our lives, every direction at this point, because that's how pervasive the federal government and the bureaucracy has gotten.
Well, the interesting thing is, Stephen, is that it was never meant to be this way, and yet if you look at the government schools and what they're teaching, and even the sort of propaganda that comes out of local government, it's like the government is supposed to be your caretaker. That was never envisioned by the founders.
Not at all, but I think if you want to harken back to when that really started to get prominence, at a minimum, it was under the Wilson administration starting in 1913. 1913 was such a traumatic year for the Constitution. But you can harken back into the late 19th century with Woodrow Wilson's writings back then that were, like a halfway middle point between Marx and Engels and what he ended up being. So it's been, 150 years. It depends on where you want to start the measure. 112 for sure.
Let's go to these amendments that you've proposed, and I find them pretty remarkable and applicable. Let's look to the first, ballot access reform and political competition restoration. We have guests on from the Libertarian Party for years. Jim Lark comes here on this program, former national chair of the LP. And one of the things he's told us is about the miserable state of ballot access across America for candidates like libertarians, but everybody else included.
That's for sure. That's what happens when you fail to pay attention to what Washington said in his farewell address in 1798. He warned about the two-party duopoly, and for I don't know how many decades now, or 100 years or more, they've controlled what happens at the state level for ballot access. That has to be broken nationwide with a constitutional amendment that sets the structure as to what ballot access can be, because they set it up to where they have low thresholds for themselves and high thresholds for everybody else. No wonder you end up with two choices that no one likes.
The article, the second that you put forward, is the restoration of the House of Representatives and citizen representation. This is one that we almost never think of because we just think this is the way it's always been, and we will have no access to our representation. We couldn't even get 5 seconds with some of these people because they're representing so many people. So what are you proposing, and what's the issue here?
So the issue with the House of Representatives at its base level is, as it was originally conceived by Madison, there was no specifics in the Constitution as to, he mentioned that there was, a maximum representation ratio of 1 to every 30,000 that would be set by Congress. Congress did that every 10 years based off of the census that was taken, but they stopped doing that, lo and behold, after the 1910 census in 1913. They just kicked the can for between 1913 and 1929, and it's been set by statute at 435 since 1929. Prior to that, every 10 years after the census, the number of members in the House would go up and up and up. We just haven't had that. We haven't had that change in, again, 112 years. What I've proposed is to bring representation in the House as local as it seems plausible to get, that doesn't interfere with what Madison originally proposed, set it to one representative for every 30,000 people, and whether that's there in Virginia or anywhere else, that's your neighbors. It could be you, even at a 1 to 30,000 ratio. You're going to know who that person is. They're going to be your neighbor. It means the House goes from 435 representatives to, based on the 2020 census, 11,050 representatives. I think Virginia would have a couple of hundred. I've got the number on my table somewhere. I don't have it right handy right now. But, that completely gets rid of all of this gerrymandering, redistricting nonsense that we've been hearing too much about for the past couple of months. And it solves, at a structural level, the things that have gotten ever worse over these past 100 years at the House level. It was never meant to be, this distant structure and body like it is.
Stephen, I wanted to talk about the next one. It's particularly important to me because I've been railing against the 17th Amendment for all the time I've been on the air here for these almost 18 years, that was really a strike at the heart of federalism and state sovereignty. So what's your proposal?
Yet again, we harken right back to everybody's favorite year, 1913. That's when the 16th Amendment for the income tax, the 17th Amendment that provided for direct election of the state senate of U.S. senators, and the Federal Reserve were established, all the same year under Woodrow Wilson's first year in office. You got to get rid of all three of them. They are horrible. They are destructive as can be to what the basic intent and functionality of our federal government was supposed to be and needs to be again. You can't have the whole purpose of the U.S. Senate was to be the voice of the states, not the people in the states. It's the place where legislation goes to die at the federal level. If you can't, and you've also got to revert back to the pre-1913 cloture rule. You can't you can't have it set at this 50% level under certain circumstances. You can't have it set at the 60% level like it was since the early 1970s, brought it down from the 2/3 requirement that it had always been before that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole purpose of the Senate. You got to have the states represent the legislatures elect the senators. They go represent the states at the federal level. It gives purpose and meaning to the 10th Amendment, to a lesser extent the 9th Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? You just all the Senate turned into since the 16th Amendment. The 17th Amendment is just a larger version of the House.
It was never intended to be such. We're talking with Stephen Scesa from Future First Publishing on the Second Bill of Rights. We'll give you a way to see all this stuff before the show's over. We're going to go to the break and come back and get to as many of these as we can. I find them all fascinating and they make a lot of sense. Stay with the Schilling Show. Heading into the final segment of the Schilling Show for today, Stephen Scesa joins us. We're talking about the Second Bill of Rights. Let's look at the article, the fourth, that you put forward, Universal Standards for Congressional Servants, Government Transparency, and Market Neutrality. This one's very important and perhaps not immediately obvious.
Yeah, it's term limits. It also provides for, if you've got 11,000 members in the House of Representatives, they don't need any staff. They can do the homework themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's in the House or the Senate, it's 12 years in each one. So you get rid of, the octogenarians that have been there for decades in both parties. It also provides for market neutrality, essentially requires anyone who gets elected to the House or the Senate to divest, even through a blind trust, if need be, from all of their investments, as well as their immediate family. So you don't have situations that they use that insider information to run their net worth up 10 to 100x. Most interesting, I think, of all is that it also requires that the House and the Senate be unpaid. So you undo the 27th Amendment and the part of the Constitution that provides for compensation. We need volunteers, not people that make money off of being in governance. They should also have a job back home. Stay out of D.C. where the swamp and the access to them is so easy for all of the lobbyists and corporations to go and get access to them. Make them be your neighbor again. Have them continue their job. Be part of the local community. Stick to 90 days, I think, is what I proposed in there at most in D.C. every year. You can do it all over the internet. You did during COVID. It's totally doable. And that way, these people have an idea of what's going on. Let's use for an example. I'm down here in West Palm Beach. Mm-hmm. My representative is Lois Frankel. I've lived here for 10 years. I've never seen her until I wrote an article about, where are you? I haven't been here for 10 years. I've never seen you. And then lo and behold, 4 weeks later, I randomly run into her at the local market. And it's like, wow. But, where's she been for 10 years? She's been in D.C. That's ridiculous. You can't have, like when we were talking about Article the Second, with 435 reps, the average representative has constituency of 775,000 people. So, under Article the Second, it harkens back to a 25 to 1 multiplication of what the current representative level is at that 1 to 30,000 people. Virginia would have 288 representatives instead of 11. It just makes so much sense. It undoes all of those negative, irresistible influences that can come upon representatives from so many different directions. Now, all of those provisions right there that prevents compensation and staff paid for by the federal government. If Richmond decides that they want their senators or representatives to have staff or compensation for doing work on behalf of the state, Richmond is more than welcome to go and do it. and it advanced the Commonwealth's efforts in D.C. however they see fit relative to the other 49 states. It's essentially applying, we'll call it a 10th Amendment approach towards those aspects of representation in D.C. from each state.
We have just a couple minutes left. We're never going to make it all the way through, but that's okay because these are important to take some time on. Stephen Scesa, let's look at this one. Article the 10th, the right to anonymity and protection from government surveillance, protection of private property. These are critical, and the sorts of things that we're dealing with now could never have been really anticipated by the founders.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Article the 10th out of the 10 proposed amendments that are in the Second Bill of Rights is the only truly substantive new right, if you want to call it that. The other 9 are more administrative and procedural, structural. But Article the 10th is substantive. It's a furtherance of the Fourth Amendment for a digital age. Like you just mentioned, there's no way that the founders could have possibly thought about what the internet and what passive surveillance can go and do right now. The two biggest scary agencies, or scary, they're not even agencies, they're scary private industry companies are Palantir and Flock. If you and your listeners have never done any research or heard of those two companies, you need to go and do some research. It's Palantir, run by Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, and then Flock. They are masters of the surveillance state, the surreptitious and quiet, ambient data collection that is going on behalf of the government through quasi-government, or in this case, private industry, and they're benefiting by billions at this point. Palantir has just been, it's a rocket for this year in the stock market.
We've got just a little over a minute left, and I want to talk about the practical aspect of this before it gets away from us. So what's the implementation plan, and how do you get this intact into law?
Yeah, because the 10 amendments, you can't do them piecemeal.
Right.
You have to do the whole package, otherwise it's just going to be a wreck. And I'm not trying to fool anybody, or certainly not anybody that's paying attention to this, to think that this is even a concept that can be reasonably discussed or argued or negotiated currently. You can't have both sides of the political spectrum come to the table under an Article 5 convention, like so many people say needs to happen. It's never been that way. That's not what happened after the Revolutionary War or the Civil War, the last two times where we've had a meaningful change to the Constitution. You only have, after those two things, and has to happen here, is you've got to have some sort of crisis or conflict start and essentially be over, if not be over, so that there's only one side left to set what the rules are going to be moving forward. I hate that. I hate that has to be the case, but that's the only way you can get there. So this is a long-term project that's probably going to take 10 to 15 years to reach that level of culmination and potentiality. And I'm prepared to go and do it, and so is my Gen Z intern group. That we're all hell-bent to do this. We have to do it for the 22nd century.
Tell us very quickly, Stephen Scesa, if people want to find the Second Bill of Rights and the work that you're doing, we've got about 20 seconds. Tell us where we can do that.
Sure. Go to the website, secondbillofrights.us. Also go search on Substack for the Second Bill of Rights. Those are the two primary things. You can also find us on X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, Truth Social, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere.
It's all out there and easy to access. It's really one of the best ideas I've seen in a long time, and I thank you for joining us here today